So just a welcome again, and I just wanted to introduce Susan. She is going to be the facilitator or the conductor of conversation with Claudia tonight. Susan is a writer, an editor, an instigator. She's on numerous boards and committees to do with all things related to life writing and spiritual life writing, and just really, really excited to hand things over to you, Susan. And you can also see more about Susan in her biography on our webpage.
Lana, thank you. Thanks for that great introduction. Really pleased everybody is here tonight. So grateful that you can take time out of a beautiful, beautiful August day or evening to join us. We're always happy and amazed that people can come together to talk about this very niche world of spiritual life writing. I always like to open this part with a land acknowledgement. It's something that those of us who live in Canada do as a regular practice. When we open a session, we can pause as part of our work, our decolonizing work, to recognize the gift and the gratitude for the land that we live on. So I'm speaking to you from the Great Lakes region of Ontario, Canada, and specifically from a place called the Haldimand Tract, which was promised to the Six Nations people. Traditionally, this land was cared for by the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral peoples. And I invite you, if you know who the Earth Keepers were in your part of the world, to just enter that into chat. And that gives us a way to kind of collect gratitude and bounty in relation to the land that sustains us. So about spiritual life writing, these webinars we founded starting in 2020 to really address a gap in something that is so vital and so important to a lot of us, but for which there is not a lot of support in the writing community. So life writing is an integrative art that brings together memory and experience. Spiritual life writing invites the whole self in: memory and experience, fact, feeling, and imagination, the profane and the sacred. So we offer these life writing sessions to help you find your authentic voice and to shed whatever fears make you hold your tongue. We really program these sessions to try to get to the heart of places where people are afraid to speak and to bring their experience front and center. And we've tried really hard to find writers who are doing really beautiful work and really critical work in that way, and who are happy to share their experience. So I'm so honored and thrilled to bring you one of those writers tonight in our session we call The Promises We Carry. And I'm going to introduce the beautiful, my friend, Claudia Putnam. I'm going to read Claudia's bio, and then she and I will go into conversation together about her short memoir, Double Negative. We'll talk about that for a while. Claudia will do a short reading from the chapbook, and then she'll lead us in a writing exercise. All of that will take maybe 30, 40 minutes, and that will all be recorded. After that, the recording is off, and as Lana said, then we open up to Q&A. So if you have questions while Claudia is talking, please enter those into chat. Lana might be able to handle them, or later they can be brought up with Claudia. But this is a really important subject that we're going to talk about tonight, so I appreciate your attentiveness. Claudia Putnam is a writer, poet, and craniosacral therapist. Her short memoir, Double Negative, won the Split Lip Press Creative Nonfiction Chapbook Prize. Her debut collection, The Land of Stone and River, won the Moon City Press Poetry Prize. A novella will be out later this year. Claudia has received several residency awards, including the year-long George Bennett Fellowship at Philip Exeter Academy in New Hampshire. She lives in Colorado, USA. Her surviving son, Julian, is a chef in Seattle. Claudia, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so pleased to reconnect with you, Susan, and just seems like my cup of tea, this group. So,
So here we are. So
here
I'm
we
going to
are.
ask one thing. So Vicky, can you spotlight me and Claudia? So just the two of us are recorded and everyone else is.
You should both be.
Are we good?
spotlighted
Is
right
that already
now.
happening? Okay,
It's
so we're
already-
good. All right, I'm not
Yeah.
going to worry about that then.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. All right. So where to begin? Where to begin? When I first met you, in an obscure little mountain town in Colorado in 1993, maybe 1993, I think. Possibly the second conversation we ever had. My kids, your son Julian, hanging out together on a little playground, was about your son Jacob. I feel like Jacob has been held in our conversations for, almost 30 years. Like, it's really incredible. And you somehow in that time have found ways of writing about that experience and bringing him home. It's just astonishing. So I want to express my gratitude for you for doing that, for being really faithful to that experience and the grief of losing a child and finding your way to come back to that and bring your story into the world in a really remarkable way. And thank you for just talking with people about it. It's a hard place to be in, but I'm really grateful to you, and I just want to express that gratitude on all of our behalf tonight. So however you want to tell us about where this story starts for you, I just invite you to begin.
That was very moving for me. So I have this friend, Rosemary Watola Tromer, and she just gets up and weeps before she starts reading her poetry. And I kind of feel like, let's just have a moment where, I don't know that I'll cry, but
Yeah,
hopefully it will help me get through the rest of the conversation.
yeah.
I also want to say I live in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, on unceded Nucha territory, which many people know as the Ute, as that's the distortion in history. But I just wanted to mention that.
Thanks.
So this story is now, Jacob, my son, was born on April 25th, 1989. And so he died 3 days later. He was born with an insurmountable heart defect, although doctors nonetheless wanted to offer certain options, or at least felt they should. So we were plunged into, at a time before Google, at a time, we were quite young, and we were plunged into a huge decision-making thing, whether or not to do a transplant, whether or not to do some other really drastic surgery, what that might mean for his life, what it might mean for our life. And, only had one day to decide, because they had to, if we were going to do a transplant, they had to get him on the right kind of preparation and list and all that kind of stuff. So, and back then, I think only 2 of them had been done. One of them was on a baboon, or with a baboon heart. And there weren't very many infant hearts available. There still are not, but there's more now. So we were just kind of plunged into, right after giving birth, this is the news, nowadays at 20 months, they might give you this news if they find it, but 20 weeks, but that was not routinely done at the time. So over the years, especially during his anniversaries, birth, death, that period of time where I feel like the veil is very thin between us, I often write a lot of poetry and journal quite a bit. And I've always felt the need to say something more, not just a testament to the person that he is, because nobody knows a baby when they're born and when they die, and I'm not saying it's easier to lose an older child, but when you do, the kindergarten teacher can get up and speak at the funeral, all these other, the friend, the neighbor, there's so many other people who are invested in that person and know that person. But when it's a baby, we were the only ones who knew him, and really me, because I'd carried him for 9 months. So it's very lonely. if any of you have lost a baby, it's very, very lonely process. And you feel like this person, this miraculous person has come through. See, I'm just going to let this happen. And
Okay.
I mean, I think it's good to know that sometimes this still hurts this much 30 something years later, 33 years later. And so part of it was to stake, say, hey, this is my son. He could have changed the world, in my opinion. And he was not allowed to. And some of that is grappling with what is fate and what is the human soul, because I felt like a soul came into my body with both of my children, distinct individuals incarnated through me. There's a lot of philosophers that go on and on about whether there's a human soul. I don't think women who have born children really have that question. So I wanted to, reflect on those things, and where he might have gone, where he might have come from. I mean, I don't have the answers, but I wanted to raise them. And, it's a delicate process to make a decision like this for someone else's life, for someone else's destiny. And also, we told ourselves at the time that we had been very courageous. And I think mostly we were. Mostly we made a decision in our son's best interest. I still think that. But over time, I started to see that, there were ways that decision was self-serving too. And I wanted to face that. And one other thing was that, I ran into kids who'd had the surgeries or had similar surgeries, and were alive, at least for a time. And I would give anything to have heard my son laugh. I just have to tell you, just if he'd lived long enough to laugh. So I really wanted to write about, they had a different take on it. These people who made different decisions, and the children, and, it wasn't always a terrible life for them. So I needed to confront that for myself too. And also, very often in our culture, or at least in America, the sort of miraculous medicine, heroic medicine is lauded as the brave and courageous, pioneering, that word, path. And, and so every time that one of these, there'd be a story about a heart transplant, you watch Grey's Anatomy, they do one every other session, every other episode or something. And, every time that would come up, I would have this noise in my head around, not so much did I do the right thing, but have you considered this, this, and this about, this type of decision? And so I don't know if I should wait further in the conversation, but one of the people who read this book right before, right when I was getting it finalized to send out, he said, it feels like you don't care any longer. You've reached a peace with the whole thing, maybe not with his death, but with all those other aspects. And you no longer care what you're just putting yourself out there, and you don't care whether people think you were a monster or think, you did the right thing or whatever. And that's only one aspect of what I wrote about in here, but it's a big piece of it. So, what else? Did you want to talk about my process, or, what?
Yeah, just take a breath and I'll take a breath. Yeah. Okay, so much is there. Okay, a couple of things. First of all, you always had, just as you said, a really strong sense of who Jacob was. When you were carrying him, you had a very strong sense of what his personality was, or that's always been really distinctive. So when I met you, you had Julian, and Julian has one kind of personality, kind of moves through the world in a very gentle way. And Jacob is mythologized, right, as this very incredible, a very different energy, an energy that you experienced as a mother. And I'm just really amazed at how you've been able to, as you say, on those anniversaries, those every year, those 3 days when the veil is thin,
Mhm.
come back into conversation, connection with Jacob and what has come through during that time. So just talk a bit about that then.
Well, I felt, I have a poem that I didn't, it's not in this collection, but it's about sort of feeling like you're visiting someone in a prison, and there's this glass and you can talk and you don't know how long you have. There's these rules that the guard has that you don't even understand. And there's fingerprints and smudges all over this glass, and we're kind of in our own captivities, and but also that process of communicating with him when he comes is changed. I used to see signs and significations everywhere, and now I feel like he's moved on into his whatever next thing, and I don't the energy is very different now.
Okay.
So that's a whole thing, and I talk about that a little bit in the book, that I had a strong sense of him. I had a strong sense of my other son, Julian, and that came to be most of, not everything. I mean, there were things I never imagined, but overall, the general shape or gesture of his person was and is how I felt about him when I was pregnant with him. There were a few years in the teenage years where that was not true, and he was not recognizable. But there's also other things that have come forward and turns that he's taken. It made me realize that I could project Jacob into the future when I could imagine him at 10 or imagine him at 7 or something like that. I could look at other 7-year-olds and say, well, he would have been a little different this way or that way. But then as the years went on, I no longer had that. That was another grief. I don't know what he would be like at 33. I really don't know. And I know there's so many other things that can come into the flow of a person's being and soul and self-expression. I don't have that in, so I don't know anymore. And that's
another layer of grief.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk about. I mean, you're a writer, right? You're a writer through and through. This is who you are in the world. I love your description of writing. It's the one thing that uses all of you. You couldn't imagine doing anything else on the planet that uses all of you the way that writing does.
Yeah, all these books in the background, everything I've ever been interested in. I can't even eat too much sugar or else I can't write. So I have to.
Yeah, everything. Writing is so that's been the place that you've gone to, if it's fair to say this, to process, think, re-enter, examine, whatever words you want to use. So talk about that, the writing in relation to all of this.
Well, I didn't write for about 6 months. I was completely silenced. I didn't write about anything. And for me, nothing. I mean, I wrote in my journal, but I didn't write any stories, anything. And for me, 6 months was a very long time. And I just had no words. I had no words. And somewhere around, I think it was Thanksgiving, the local paper carried a cover story about losing him and kind of again evoking him as a person. This Sunday magazine kind of thing as a cover story. And so that was my first. And once I did that, I could start to write other things about other topics, other short stories and things that I was working on. But I was just silenced. My tongue, what was there to say? What was there to say? A person is here, a whole person. And then because some stupid cell divided wrongly, gone, So over the years, certainly poetry has been a place. Some of the more autobiographical short stories, there's someone who's lost a child or a baby. I'm writing a historical novel right now, and I sometimes feel like it's the most autobiographical of anything I've ever written. And so she's lost a twin, one of her twins died, and it comes in that way that it changes your way of looking at the world. I keep examining that, and the other thing that was distinctive about this experience was I was 26. So I didn't know anyone who had died. No
Oh,
one,
right.
no
Wow.
grandmother, nothing. I mean, maybe, I mean, in my childhood, my cousin had died of SIDS, but I didn't, I was 3. So, I mean, there were a few little things like that, but I did not know. So I don't know who came for him. I believe, most beings go into death, into the arms or into the company.
Of someone. Yeah, they would know.
And I don't know who did that for him. So, I kept having to come back and grapple with those things, things that haven't laid down. They've, I feel more settled since writing this, but it was a 10-year process to write this book,
Say more about that.
I use Scrivener,
Mhm.
and I don't know, a Scrivener is a software thing that's designed for long projects. And it's designed to kind of write in scenes or fragments or whatever. So I felt comfortable. I could just, write a paragraph or write a couple pages and get one of these things I was wrestling with down on paper. And then I would just put it away, not even know what to do next, just not have any more words for that time, and then I'd go back and I would write, I don't know, the next year, somewhere, maybe 6 months later, whatever, another piece. And then I would think, well, that kind of overlaps, but I wouldn't worry about that. I would just write these things. But then, it was 60 something pages. And I had a really hard time getting the whole thing into my head because it's not necessarily a linear account.
Right.
It's goes into realms of mathematics and what is infinity and what's negative infinity. And, they explore some of the poetry of Emerson. It does a lot of different things that I've been thinking about over 30 whatever years. And I also wanted to look at grief over that length of time because none of the grief books do that. They might look at it for a year or two, or, at 5 years, you'll feel this way or something like that. I've never really read anything that talks about, how you might feel 30 something years later.
Mhm.
So, so I had all these angles and feelings that I wanted to get into. And I didn't know how to knit them together. And I just kept flopping them into Scrivener, putting them away in their folder. And then, somewhere around the 60-page mark, I was like, I have no idea how to put this together. I think it was probably 100 pages itself, but, it turned into an essay of 60 something pages. And I just had to find a way to knit them.
Mhm.
And my head cleared one day. Maybe that was Jacob's help. I don't know. And I started to find a way, and, I still had to have people read through it and tell me if I'd repeated myself here and there. And, was this boring? Was this, but, I had to cut things that I liked, but they just weren't, even though this goes all over the place, they still were too all over the place. And, but it was a long process and I gave myself that time.
That's amazing. Yeah. So how did you find a home for it then? This is what's so
Oh,
remarkable,
yeah. Well, it's too long to be in most journals,
right?
and it's too short to be a book.
Yeah.
So I started focusing. I did go to some journals that did publish longer things, but usually from more famous people than me. So, if they're going to give a third, I mean, one editor even wrote that. He said, I love this. You write really well, but I can't justify a third of my journal, to someone who isn't a draw, basically.
What would the word count have been? Just to nerd out here for a minute.
23,000, something.
Yeah,
like
20. Okay,
that.
right. So for most editors, we start to brace around 5,000 and 6,000
Yeah,
where
yeah.
it's like,
And I tend to write long. I mean, most of my
Yeah.
short stories are 5 to 7 and sometimes 10. And so I'm always looking for journals that take longer work. But in any case, I started realizing that it probably wasn't going to go to a journal. And so then I started focusing on chapbook publishers that publish prose, because most chapbooks are poetry.
Poetry, right?
So I started doing that. And it didn't take too long once I started doing that. Split Lip took it, which I was a little bit surprised by. Split Lip is very hip.
Very hip. Okay.
You know, it's a great press. They did a great job with the book. They kept to their schedules. Nobody dropped any balls, and there was no mystery, no delays. But they, you know, usually publish kind of edgier, you know, flash hybrid stuff. And while this maybe is an edgy topic, or maybe, you know, does go in a lot of different directions, it is basically a long form essay.
Yeah.
So, and, you know, I was surprised that, that they wanted it. I mean, not, you know,
Yeah.
I sent it to them, so I guess I must have thought there was some kind of a fit, but
Yeah.
but
It won the contest, basically.
yeah, yeah. So I started, you know, basically to get published these days, you
have
know,
to.
get a book published, you enter a contest, and you know, and you wait because it's a lottery to even get to, you know, maybe you'll be selected as a finalist, and then you see, and you know, the person who is the judge does not write this type of essay. She writes much more hybrid, much more like flashy bits and pieces that are makes less of an effort to weave together.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
she's a wonderful essayist, but she you know, this was different from what she
Yeah.
writes.
But
So
this really spoke to her. Yeah. She would never have chosen this otherwise.
yeah, so I mean, but that is the thing. I spend a lot of money. It's ridiculous. You know, I am disabled. I have bipolar disorder, which I also discuss in this book. And so I live on not much money. Um, and I sometimes will write to these judges or, you know, editors and say, you know, do you have a separate little place where people have no money can send stuff?
Yeah.
And sometimes they say, oh, no, we never thought of that. And sometimes they say, yeah, sure, send it here.
Wow.
So I pay when I can, but if I really feel like I would like to, it's a good match for somebody, and, you know, I just don't have $30 or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so I ask for help, and that's another spiritual practice right
That's
there.
another spiritual practice. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
did you want to talk about the spirit? Is this a good time to talk about the spiritual?
Yeah,
thing?
let's do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Talk about that, and then I'll ask you to do the reading, and then we'll do the writing exercise, but we'll keep it really short for people so there's time. Okay. Yeah,
Right.
just talk
So,
about.
I mean, when we met, I was living in a town called Eldora. That was more the Arapaho territory, but and it was on the Front Range of Colorado, above Nederland, a town called Nederland, above Boulder. And it was a town where Venturi winds. Venturi is it's a wind that hits one side of a pass, and then it hits the other side, and it accelerates down into the valley. We have 3 passes above that valley. So it was a very intense place to live, and a lot of amazing things happened to me in terms of my own dreams. I had visions, you know, a sort of a mystical side to my personality. I'd also had a pretty bad head injury right before I moved there. That might have been part of it. I have a book that says, are you having, you know, more of these mystical experiences? Anyway, so you know, so a lot of, I mean, I was really working toward integrating some kind of belief system, which I did not have. I mean, I was raised Catholic, but I did not have an integrated belief system, still don't really. And this just shattered what I thought I believed, this experience. So, but I was so close. I think when you live it so intensely close to the land, whether you're farming it or whether you're just living in a maelstrom, you know, you do have, I think, visions come out of the earth. So so I did have this really intense earth-based spirituality that was happening, and then I felt so betrayed by nature. You know, I mean, why would you betray me, you know? I was in tune, and so I was very angry at God, a goddess, you know, or the earth, everything, for a while. But I was kind of getting that back. And then I went through a divorce and had to move out of that valley. And that kind of shattered me. It just took away, I had to go support myself. It took away all my time for that. And it just emptied me in a way that I had a hard time getting it back. And as I was writing this, I also, you know, realized that I was having a breakdown. So I had to go into disability. So I had more time for self-care, which is the upside.
Mhm.
And I had this expression process, and I was given the space to do it by the universe. And I also began to train as a craniosacral practitioner, which is being very visionary with your hands and it is a woo-woo practice. I don't care. There's something that's sort of technical about it, but there's also a lot that isn't. And so I felt like I was coming back to this whole piece of me that I had started, this path that I had started on. I felt like I was coming home. And that is when my head cleared and I was able to finish this project.
Wow.
So, anyway, so I hope that, I don't know if that helps.
Yeah,
But
no, that's really important, and I think that'll come up again when we have a chance to talk in general. But and I just appreciate you putting it that way. It's yeah, the
so,
intensity of that.
um,
Yeah,
yeah,
amazing.
so,
So
um,
let's make some space for you just to go right into the work and bring
all
some
right.
of that language forward.
So, okay. So I'm just going to start at the beginning, and then I'm going to skip a section where I describe Jacob more, because even though that draws you in, it's hard for me to read. And also I wanted to get to another section that I wouldn't have time to do in this context. So 3 decades ago, my first son was born, and 3 days later, he died. He died of a broken heart. He died in agony. He drowned in fluid backed up into his lungs. Because we couldn't speak to him, or because our culture tells us babies don't understand language, we watched, unable to communicate why this was happening to him, why we were letting this happen to him. His name was Jacob, Jake. He came to an end in a round box carved from an aspen branch. Inside, a handful of white ash and bone. Ash, less than for any of the dogs I've owned. Ash and a melted snap from the onesie he wore into the oven. As a child, I used to sit in church, listening to talk of God as a being who not only always will be, but who always was. Negative infinity. In math class, I would get distracted pondering it. In the West, the organization of reality proceeds from left to right, out of nothing, through the origin, and on to infinity. Eventually, I figured out that the origin is only where we stand right now. All the same, that 0 point on the graph would pull me right down into the rabbit hole. I was okay somehow with the up, down, and right-hand lines all stretching off into infinity, and the quadrants on the right in their full dimensions doing the same. The left, negative infinity, with its implications of negative time. What did that mean? The before here. The before when. Lose a baby and you are shoving the child back past the womb, past the heart, past the gleam in your eye, back beyond the 0 on the Cartesian graph. Look at me, pregnant, doing yoga shoulder stands and skiing 4 miles per day. See me curled around my growing belly in a papasan chair, reading William Faulkner's collected stories aloud to my unborn son. Now, here I am with a child who is outside me. Here he is, pierced with a dozen needles, being tucked into a life support box for shipment from Boulder to Denver for diagnosis. I am allowed to stroke his arm, eyes which have been screwed shut, open. He frowns at me. Who is sworn to protect him? Sworn because I'd said in my heart and out loud again, almost daily for 9 months that I would. When he was 2 weeks late, I'd become very strident with those promises. Come out, little baby, I'd said. It's safe out here. I will always protect you. This is a stupid thing for any parent to say. I learned that on the day he was born. I also learned it over time, raising my second son. There is very little a parent can do to protect a child. I am only on the edge of that lesson now, contemplating him as he lies in this red box, being prepared for transport. This box, these needles, this tube down his throat. This is not what we had talked about on all those walks together. Negative infinity. This child whose soul has appeared from that lower left quadrant on the graph, negative space and time, entered my womb and my mind. Now, here before me, eyes boring into mine with full recognition. We have always known another. I do get it now. Pick a point of origin, and the graph extends in all directions. It has always existed. Do I have time to do the cemetery thing, or should I?
Sure, just go ahead. Yeah.
As a kid, I often wandered in the cemetery in our New England village, entranced by the stories on the stones. There were whole families buried together, children lined up under mini marble headstones, dead within a week of one another. 5 in this family, 7 in that. A couple of rows for this epidemic, a few more for that. Eunice, Jefferson, Innie, Emmeline, Olive, Kitty, Sarah, John, Elmer, Melvin, Mary Ann, Nellie, Walter, Josiah, Martha, Nina, Lucine, Mary Bell, Carrie Jane. The graves of the unnamed babies, infant, worn marble chip after worn marble chip, some impossible to read, smudges of God's eraser. The parents must have got used to it. We tell ourselves, surely they must. In 1842, New England's poet lost his son to scarlet fever. This is lordly man's down lying, he wrote, after his 5-year-old son fell to that then common malady, star by star, his world resigning. A threnody is a poem which rages and grieves for its first half. In the second section, there's an attempt to make peace with God. Ralph Waldo Emerson's threnody travels as far from faith and into despair as ever the man himself did. Only years later was he able to pick up the poem and finish it. The path to peace for him was in seeing that death defines life, that you wouldn't want to nail the wild star to the track on the half-climbed zodiac, or keep the life force too starkly pent in figure bone and lineament. Light is light, which radiates. Blood is blood, which circulates. Life is life, which generates. And many seeming life is one. Wilt thou transfix and make it none? Wilt thou? It's out there.
Wow. Life is life. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to be our psychopomp now and take us into the writing exercise.
Okay.
So it feels like this is a place that people can go, and we'll make it really, really short. Are you okay with that? Just the short time for people? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, can I share my screen here? Let's do that. And, oh Lord, where is, hang on a sec here. Here we go. Slideshow. Okay, here we are. So this is our short writing exercise that Claudia has designed, and she's going to read it and decide how much time to give everyone to do this. And I'll just move us through the slides.
Okay. I'm not sure how much time I should say. I mean, what?
Yeah, let's pull it up and then talk about it.
Okay.
So here's the contact info, so people know how to reach you. And there's the contact information is again in the final slide.
So should I say something now, or you put that in the slide?
Yeah, sorry, but your screen
I know.
Isn't
Okay.
Okay. Why don't we give people 5 minutes to do this? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. You read it and set this up however you like.
So this comes from the amazing creative nonfiction writer Carol Bly, who died a few years ago. But this is an exercise she would use, and this is toned down, but her exercise was write 5 pages on the worst thing you can imagine happening to you. And I've come back to that multiple times because sometimes that worst thing happens and I have to go write something else. But I would say, write a page or 2 pages, make notes, whatever. Into what you fear, what your greatest loss would be, what your heartbreak would be. Maybe you've been in it already. But don't go as deep as, you don't have to go that deep, but just start it and start, how would you approach it? How would you approach talking about it? How would you lean into that experience? Because no matter what you write, whether it's a memoir about someone's death or whether it is just about, getting out of a group that you were part of, or a memoir about, getting out of an addiction, whatever it is, you need to be able to face the shadow and to face your fears. And it might even be that people read what you wrote. That might be your worst fear. So write a few pages or just some words and outline or whatever seems to work for you on not just what it is, but how you would approach getting into it. I'm gonna
Okay.
do it.
5 minutes.
Okay.
1 minute. Claudia,
Yeah. Yeah.
take
I'm
this
ready.
page, adapt this however you like, and we can give it three minutes for this. How's that?
3 minutes to read it, or
Yeah, just go ahead and read it, and then but adapt it as you go if you want. This is what we
Okay.
have here, but
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, this is messy. It's first draft. I hope you know. So this would be the title called. The title would be 5 pages on the worst. It used to be my son running away, as he once tried to do. It used to be major death, disaster, destruction. I think a lot now as an American about Civil War, about possibly having to or feeling like I had to kill someone. I've bought a gun and learned how to use it. What if it were a person in the far side of my sights? But this is not the worst thing. The worst thing for me has turned out to be far more banal. I fear poverty in my old age. I grew up in poverty. I fled it ever since. During the recession most associated with 2008, I had a dream. The margins of society were so much wider than I had thought, in that I was in them. It seems silly to worry about dimes and dollars with apocalypse looming. I'm 92% certain that we will have civil war, and if not that, climate change will get us. So I'm going off. I don't have anything written anymore. And these two probably are really related. But recently, my husband left me, and as a person who lives on disability, and as a person who has a limit placed on her income, I am terrified of A, facing this apocalypse by myself, but B, living without enough to support myself. And so I would go into what that means to me and all the childhood trauma around poverty and stuff, and why maybe it's not such a terrible thing, such a banal thing after all. So
Okay. Wow. That's a lot. Well, we asked for this. We set this up for this. We asked to create a space. So I appreciate you leaning, hard right into it. And
I probably would move things around and not necessarily start where I started here. This is the hack where you clear your throat. And
yeah, exactly. So I'm mindful of the time and the fact that we always give people, we tell them this runs for an hour, and some people will need to leave. So I'm going to thank those people for staying, and we can stop the recording any moment now. And then for those people who can stay, we're going to stay around for a few more minutes, so you have a chance to ask questions,